Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you guys are at. I hope you have a fantastic day. It's SoulSaint here, and we're here with some more Raid Shadow Legends information regarding the new Faction Wars hard mode and the conditions that come along with them. So, what you guys see on your screen here is actually going to be a contribution to two people that I want to give a shout out to. The one who gave it to me, which was Suitcase Hero, which I believe he received it from the creator, which is Tyraku. So, salutes to Tyraku for this video and this one. I wanted to break this one down and kind of give some perspective of what I think would be good answers and good options. And now, keep in mind, this is all speculatory, and we're going to break it down per faction. But the summary words, the way this is going to go is there's 21 stages for the new hard faction wars. Each stage is going to have 3 different things you need to do. I think pretty much the first one is clearing the stage. The second one is going to be to clear the stage without anybody dying. And of course, the third one is going to be a special condition, a special restriction that we have to accomplish. With that being said, though, over the next couple days that we're going to have the opportunity to be able to explore, it's going to be really important to try to get the ball going. And I want to have some fun with this and kind of just explore some options. May not be the best one, may not be the worst one, of some ways to maybe accomplish these specific trials, these specific restrictions. So with that being said, we're going to start off with our first one, which is going to be the Bannerlord tribe here today. I'll have some prompts pop up from Editor Soul to kind of show some of the things that we're going to do for each stage. So I'm going to try to break it down. All right. So, stage 1 for the Bannerlords is going to be reduced, and just a forewarning now, what we're hearing now and the information that we got is based off of what we received from the test server. It is subject to change, so obviously if there's different stages with different requirements or prerequisites, then obviously, you know, it'd be a moot point. But I wanted to get ahead of the curve and try to give some kind of credence, some kind of validity behind it. So, with that being said, let's get into it. The first stage is going to be reduce 6+ enemies' health by 50% with 1 skill. Now, to do this, I kind of feel like almost any champion, any plug-and-play option could be a viable way to do so. However, depending on the target itself, as well as how you approach doing that, is going to be a very big precursor to doing a big amounts of damage. So, what I like to do is get some enablers, disablers, and then the actual nukers themselves. So, setup champions to be poignant about it. So if your attack damage or your damage dealer is going to be an attack type champion, obviously you're going to want increased attack, and we're going to look for options to enable that. The same thing is going to be true towards like disabling the enemy. We're looking for like decreased defense, maybe decreased or like weaken or something around those lines. So I'm going to try to throw some options out there. This was going to be fairly straightforward. You just got to do damage, go ham, go home type deal, right? Now we are expecting this to be a lot harder to go into since it's going to be a higher scale. It's going to be difficult, a higher difficulty in general. But the first one that I kind of wanted to notate towards that I think would be a great option for setting up the enemy would be Stagnite. His A2 is a decreased defense and a decreased attack against all enemies. Maybe using this to set up your nuker so that when they go pop, they have everything they need could be very valuable, right? That decreased defense will make it a lot more poignant or a lot more like power for the punch whenever you go in to do some damage. Now, there are some other knots that I would like to throw out there. I mean, obviously, we have increased attack and increased defense from maybe someone like Discard as an example could be pretty good to help enable the team. Same thing with Archmage Helmut, who does increased crit rate, increased crit damage, specifically being valuable. Those are some buffs that could help enable your team to hit hard. Now, mind you, I do think it's important to kind of note that, like, depending on what you're looking for damage dealers, you can either go for like a big single target nuker or a big AoE. I think if you're trying to survive and get through the battle and not have to worry about the battle of attrition, obviously, then you would probably want a big, substantial, as high of a mythical or legendary option as you can get, right? So we are going to point those out, but I did want to give some nods to some potential champions that could also pack a punch. So believe it or not, in terms of like support options, I think increased attack, Ilfrig, I used him when I was progressing up in Bannerlord's normal. I thought this would be a good champion to kind of use as a focal point for increased attack as well as turn meter boosting to get you into the fight. But for big damage, honestly, you'd be surprised at like how someone like Lady Annabelle can do some pretty significant damage. I think she could be a pretty good nod. Some good sustain, some good options there to kind of also keep the team afloat. Stag we mentioned was pretty decent, but if we're going to talk about like legendary nukers, I mean, it's kind of a foreblown thought to say like, obviously Taras can really rip into the enemy and tear some stuff up, you know? There's also Baron, who I think would be a great nod just straight up hit a big spike with the Sky Piercer, and that'd be pretty much the damage dealing effect, right? But if we want to go to more free-to-play options for those that have been around during the Monster Hunter collab, Rathalos, his A3, attacks all enemies, also gives himself increased crit damage if you don't have the options that we said earlier for increasing those buffs and whatnot. Could be a great nod. Or in spectrum to this, maybe his A2, which also has the ability to ignore. Couple that maybe with a champion that also puts up HP burn. This could be some really good options to really enable Rathalos to go ham. And I think that could be a good nod to kind of introduce this team. So obviously those staples are really good, and this is pretty much a straightforward option for you to consider. Ronda could be a great nuker with an AoE A1 or a really pack-a-punch A2. That's awesome as an option as well. Stultus as a defensive nuker, he sets himself up with the A3. A big stun on the A2 could be pretty useful for the team there. I think those are some pretty cool options. So we won't dwell on this one too much. It's pretty much set up your team, go ham, go home. And that's pretty much stage 1. Stage 2. Stage 2 is going to be about provoking. It says it wants you to provoke at least 10 times. You want to place 10 plus provokes. Now, let's go and work our way from the bottom up. Obviously, we have some options, and I think this was where your champion pool is going to be the dictating portion of this. Now, you could be all about like the very best of what you have, but you may need to slot in one champion that is designed to help accomplish that particular goal. For me, I wanted to talk about a couple champions I thought would be very valuable, like Giscard. Maybe we talked about he gives that increased defense, increased attack. He also does an AoE provoke. And you got to go against like 3 waves. Typically, it's like 3 rounds, 3 rotation of Mads. You go in the first round, you A2, that's 4 or 5 or so provokes that have been placed. That's already like close to half of this trial being completed. You know, maybe take your time beating into the enemy, maybe add some CC so you can kind of slow down the fight a little bit, clean up, move on to the next round, and hopefully by that point, you know, it's a 3-turn cooldown. You could cycle him back again towards being able to do yet again another provoke round, which is another 3 to 4. You're pretty much already, if not already done, pretty close to it, you know, 3 to 4 to 5 champions that you would go against. So 2 rotations of that, and you pretty much have everything you need, right? Now, I think he's a great option because he has an AoE provoke. Let's see if there's anybody else that I would throw in the hat. I think Seneschal technically also provokes everybody as well. It's a 50% chance, so he's a little bit more of a book reader, and I kind of, that's the only thing that's a little bit of a turnoff in terms of like using him, as well as the fact that it's a 4-turn cooldown. So I would favor Giscard a little bit more, but just keep in mind that he attacks on enemies, so if you're going against like a magic affinity champion, there is a chance he could weak hit. The same thing is also true, I believe, for Seneschal. I believe he also... No, he does it, though, so you could just straight up provoke and you have it. So it doesn't matter if they're spirit. The affinity issue is not so much because it's just placing the provoke, you know? So there's some value there. I believe that's pretty much the big ones that I would normally shout out in terms of provokers right off the rip. There may be 1 or 2 other ones. If you guys see for epic options, let me know. I believe that's pretty much it for the most part. Let's see if we can find maybe 1 more option. I thought Orndorff may have it. He has one on his A1. I'd say that's a little bit lower in terms of value, but it is something that you could technically consider using, you know? It's something. It's something. But let's go up to our legendaries here. Let's see what we got for options here. I think one of the first ones I wanted to point out, I believe it was Sigmund. Sigmund has an AoE provoke that also does decrease attack, and he also has some other features that'll help enable the survivability of your team, or maybe control the fight a little more. You know, it gives you some more options to work with, right? That's what we should expect from our legendaries. I don't believe Lord Chamford has anything there, so there's nothing really too crazy to worry about. Same thing with Helior. I think he's just all about redirect and transferring debuffs and shielding a little bit there. Let's see. Is there anyone else that can provoke? I believe that is it. So yeah, out of all your options, I think from like the epic side, you could definitely lean towards the Giscard, which I think I'm going to start leaning towards. If you have a Sigmund already kind of decked out and ready to go, you could technically do that too as well. There is Black Knight who does it on an A1. There is that as an option. It is available if you wanted to do that. He also brings some sustain to the team and a little bit of damage. Not too crazy, but something to work with. You have that as an option too as well. And then, of course, I want to point out another way you can also accomplish this too, which is by using a set like it's known as literally Provoke, which gives you a 30% chance to place a Provoke debuff. So if you do on-hit damage on a target, if you're doing like a champion that does like a lot of AoE with this set, you could also maybe accomplish that too as well. And I think that's something important to nod. Now, with that being said, going back to our list here, stage 3, placing a stun debuff 10 times. You have to do at least 10 stuns. My first initial thought about this was like, man, I wonder if there's any options in terms of like support champions or like utility champions on the epic side that can maybe do it. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't really find too many, if I remember any at all, to be honest with you. And another way I want to kind of show you this, if you may not have maybe one of the options, or you're not sure if you have one of the options, one thing that we could always do with our champion pool, and this is actually kind of a bonus, where you can include all your vaults, so basically everything you have, include the faction, and we can go to Bannerlords, right? Then from here, we could sort out by whatever type of buff, debuff that we need that's going to facilitate it, and it shows everything. So this is actually a great visual. You can see all your options, including even rares, if that's all you have to offer, right? So with that being said, you have Risk Harm, I believe is how you say his name. He has an A1 chance to place a 20, bookable up to a 30% chance to stun. Not too great, a little bit on the lower side. There's Knight Errant, who also has an A2. It's only on one enemy. Uh, and it has a 60% chance, bookable up to a 90% chance to stun. And then, of course, we have epics like Archmage Helmet, which I believe is his A2. You hit the first initial target, which would ideally be like a positive affinity target because you want it to crit. I believe so. Yeah, it attacks all other enemies if the first attack is critical. So you want it to crit. So you hit a positive affinity target that you would want to hit, like a green target. And then the second hit would apply the stun across the board with everybody, right? Obviously, there is some caveats to whether or not that would be successful, but this could be a great champion to help you achieve being able to capture that 10 stuns. I believe even refreshing them, I'm not entirely sure about this, but like refreshing them or maybe even being able to reapply said debuffs will be valuable. Most stuns are only on a 1-turn duration, so you're going to have to reapply the moment it falls off anyways. But that may be partnered with an alternative option like Saltus, like we mentioned before, who could stun. And then, of course, there is, I believe, Cillian the Lucky on his A3. It's only one enemy, though, so, and I think it's conditional... No, it has a straight-up chance to stun the debuff, right? To put the stun debuff for 2 turns, so that's pretty good. And then steal in the target turn meter, so he could be a really good control champion in that regard. I believe that's pretty much the big one that he's part for. We may even use him just to see how he holds up in that particular stage, depending on the case. Now, this is something I want to pause about when we're talking about options for stunning people. You definitely want to pay attention to what's in the waves, and we're going to find out more information as the content releases. But pay attention to affinity. I mean, we obviously have 2 options with Stultus and insert your choice of Cillian the Lucky or maybe even Archmage. I think Archmage right off the rip has more to offer in terms of like being able to stun multiple targets so that you can kind of get through the content pretty quickly. You could pick or choose maybe both. Who knows? It depends on what you have available on your champion pool. But just based that off of that knowledge in mind, you want to be very careful. Then, on top of that, too, just like how we had the Provoke set, I believe there's also a stun set available that you could use on any target that has a chance to place. Maybe partner that with some masteries like Fearsome Presence, which increases the chance to place a stun from a skill or an artifact by 5%. Those are also great ways to kind of incorporate those sets, even though they're not something that you would normally use on those champions. You know, maybe you could do it one time for that and be able to facilitate that goal and then keep it moving, you know? Now, with that being said, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next one here. The next stage is going to be stage 4, which is about manipulating buff or debuff durations. This one is kind of interesting. So manipulating it, I would assume, is either increasing or decreasing the duration of it, right? 20 plus times. So we have to do it quite a bit. Now, we're looking for champions that could do that. And my first initial thought was we need someone who could buff and who can also extend them too as well. And I'm trying to see if we can find out if there's anybody there. Let's go to our filters here. We're probably going to stick with the filters a little bit more here. We're going to look at other effects. Let's look at positive ones. We want to increase buff duration, right? So we want to manipulate buff or debuff duration. So let's take a look at the positive side. Buff side, we have to filter for our faction of choice, which is going to be the Bannerlords here. Everything else is all agreeable. You have Valerie. I have Valerie right now currently, which is her A2, to increase the duration of all buffs and also decrease the duration of all debuffs on all allies by 1 turn. I believe both iterations of those apply to the mission, the prerequisite, the requirement, the restriction, should we call it that? And both, of course. So if you're manipulating debuffs or buffs, it counts for each one you do. And I believe that's the case. If they do it like once per ability, then you're gonna have to kind of work your way into like resetting these cooldowns, and that could be a bit of a challenge. So I'm gonna believe it's per buff, per debuff that's being manipulated, and you just need to do 20 of those basically in tandem before the end of the stage. And she's a great option for it. I think that's a great contribution. So maybe partner that up with someone like, for example, my other option, which would be Androck. And now, for me, I think my option is going to be Androck because he places like at least 3 debuffs. And if someone is even lower, it's an additional one on top of that. And then he can extend it on top of that. So 3 by, just looking at my own team as an example, if I have 5 champions and they all have like 3 buffs, 3 times 5 is what? 15. That's already like, you know, basically we're 3/4 of the way done with this entire restriction, and then we can kind of keep it going. By the time we finish the waves and finish the boss, I'm pretty sure I'd be able to cycle it maybe once or twice, and then we're done. I think he's going to be a really, really strong contribution towards this one, and this is where I think Androck is going to shine even more than what he's normally known for, because he's also able to speed up your team tremendously, which means you can cycle into doing these control elements, these control aspects, or these restrictions as we call them, a little bit more effectively. So really, really good option here. I think that's going to be my answer. And this is something I did with some members of my community in the Discord. We were chilling late at night when we saw this this spreadsheet, and I was like, you know what? Let's see what we have to offer for this particular restriction or this particular challenge. And my first thought was like, oh, I got Androck. I'm chilling. I'm big chilling on this one. So very big W there. Let's look on the flip side of it because they said manipulate debuffs, right? So we could decrease debuff duration, which is also another way to do it. For me, I only have Valerie, so that's pretty much all I have to offer there. Let's see if there is anything for negative sides. So increasing debuff duration, I think, is also a part of manipulation. And someone like maybe, now this is probably not like something that's idealistic, but it is an option to consider, is Septimus. And I believe it's going to be, let's see here. I think it's the A1 or the passive. Each attack has a 30% chance of increasing the duration of all debuffs on the target by 1 turn. So it's the passive. 30% is not really crazy to work to scream at home, but it is something to, I mean, that's all you got for an option. You're trying to clear the stage of the one and done and have all the stars done. Obviously, this will be one way to do it. Damage inflicted by each attack increases by 30% if the enemy's current HP is over 50%. That has nothing to do with the restriction, but this could be a valuable option so that you can just be nuking and doing damage as you would normally see fit for Septimus, and then if they already have debuffs on it, you may be having a small little chance, a third of a chance to be able to extend that overall. I'm trying to think if there's any other epics that I could think of for this faction that might be able to do it. For the most part, I think that's pretty much it. There may be some other champions that may also have the opportunity to extend a buff or two. I'm trying to see if there's anything there that might be visible for us to consider. You guys let me know if I'm missing a champion that you think. I would love to hear from you guys an epic option, maybe for our more early progressing accounts or accounts that may not have the bells and whistles in terms of this particular faction. Let us know what you think. I think this is pretty fun to kind of like consider, though. Trying to go into my memory bank of like, oh, what do I have for an option here? And I'll be honest with you, it's kind of tough here because like I sometimes feed some champions that I think I'm never going to use. Next thing you know, they come up in value, and that's kind of where I feel like we may or may not have like hurt ourselves long term with it. Almost makes you think like, man, is almost every champion going to be viable now as an option? And it makes you think, right? I wonder also too as well if removing debuffs has to do with manipulating the debuff duration because it either completely diminishes it or I guess removing it doesn't necessarily answer that. I think it's no for that, but I think that like if you were to reduce it, it does work that way. So I guess maybe like an Artemage, Sir Artemage's A2 wouldn't apply to this particular challenge, Anyways, with that being said, we're going to go and move on to the next one. The next one's going to be Stage 5, land 40 plus hits on enemies while they're under leech debuffs. So we need leech. In a summary of words, I could think of one right off the rip that I mentioned earlier that is actually low-key a good damage dealer, and it's Lady Annabelle. Now, she has a lot of different ways you could build her, obviously, but I think what's really going to shine for us in that particular stage is she has a 100% chance to land a leech debuff and a decreased speed debuff with targets that are under 50% turn meter, bookable to 100% chances on 3-turn cooldown, and it's AoE. So no matter how many targets we go against, we just need to get leech out, and then we can just hit multiple times on those targets, and then that's it. We have the trial done. So if we are beating up these guys a little too fast or a little, it's going by pretty quickly, we can reapply it pretty quickly with Lady Annabelle as well. So I think she's automatically like my number one option. I thought in the back of my head that's like, you know what? This might be it. This might be it. All right. So let's go back to the filter here for a second here. We're going to try to see if we can find an option that is good for the Bannerlords that has leech. The multi-hits are kind of open-ended. You could almost pick a lot of AoEers. You could pick multi-hitters like Rhonda, who does like a triple hit, for example. All that matters is that you land 40 hits on targets that are under leech debuffs, and this is throughout the entire stage, okay? But let's see if there's anybody else that provides leech for this faction. There is Seneschal. Seneschal, I believe it on his A1, has a chance to provide a leech debuff. So maybe you build him as like your support champion to kind of help control the waves, maybe even be a little bit of a healer with the veil. But you need that leech debuff out. Now, it's only a 40%, so it's a little bit on the lower side in terms of value. But that could be an option to get you on the board. Next thing you know, he counterattacks, you got the leech up, and then you guys just bum rush him and follow through with that Rhonda or those multi-hitters to start getting a lot of pressure. And then, another target that got provoked by him, he counterattacks and gets leech on them. Then you could just run that guy down and try to get as much hits. And that might be one way you could probably beat the stage. It's possible. There's also Knight Errant. I believe it's on his A1 as well. It's a 30% chance, bookable up to a 50% chance. A little bit better, but not by much. I think we're still leaning towards Lady Annabelle as our option here to be able to do that particular leech debuff. And then last but not least, I believe we have Manaya, who does it on one enemy. Feel like this one is not one that I wouldn't pick her for the sole purpose of being able to do a leech debuff. I think it would be more so with the intent that we want to do like control with like debuffs and healing and being able to kind of keep our team alive, we might refer to her a little bit more, depending on what you have on your account. But she is an option if she is your only option to maybe be able to provide at least a least debuff on all enemies for 2 turns. So it's good AoE. It is like an upgraded version of this, so maybe you can get more value out of her as a support, and then she helps you set up, and then the rest of your team is set up to do the damage however you see fit. You could technically use her that way. I might just lean on Lady Annabelle since she's an epic and she's already kind of built up on my account. I'm leaning towards that because I believe if you read the kit here, it has a 75% chance of placing those debuffs. Bookable up to 100%, but I don't know if I want to go out of my way to book up Anaya just for that restriction when we have someone like Lady Annabelle who can maybe keep the team alive, you know? All right. With that being said, though, let's go ahead and see what else we got here. That's your options for applying leech, and of course, your damage dealers are kind of like, or your hitter, multi-hitters, whatever you want to call it. It's up for you to decide amongst your combination of champion pool, so don't want to go too far into depth with that one, but stage 5, not too bad. Now, stage 6 is all about manipulating turn meter 40 plus times. That's a lot. I'm not going to lie. I'm going to lean to my big boy at the very tippy top. But let's see. Who provides turn meter manipulation? So manipulate, when to me, is either good pro, like proactively giving yourself turn meter, or proactively reducing it on the enemy. So they could go either way. My first initial thought, I'm going to lean to someone that I used before also as well in my faction, like I told you before. He fills turn meter when he does increased attack. Eelfrig's a great option there. Let's see if there's anybody else that does turn meter. We're going to refer to our trusty filter yet again. Let's see what we got for options. And we're going to go down to other effects. We're going to do positive effects here. And then we're going to do filter meter, which actually turns into a lot more of an option when you start looking at it in this field. There's Kaja. There's Lady Quillen. Let's go down the epics first. So Lady Quillen, I believe it's on her... Let's see, A1. So whenever she hits with her A1, that's at least 1 turn meter manipulation, which will apply towards that. But you'd have to be able to hit with that at least like 40 times. So that seems a little bit tedious. Let's see if there's anything else here. Fills the turn meter of all allies by 30% of this attack kills an enemy. So if you kill somebody, then your turn meter filling your entire team, which it could be up to like 5 people. That's 5 by that. That's better. It's looking a little bit better. But it's conditional to killing somebody. So that's a little bit of a tough one when it comes to like attacking an enemy, you know, killing an enemy. And it has to be from the skill, too, as well, which is also kind of important. Everything else is all about attacking and buffing up the allies and whatnot, which can be valuable depending on what you're looking for. Kaja, I think this one's kind of a no-brainer. Her A3 is a fill turn meter of all allies by 20%. And then, of course, I believe Timid, the partner to her, I believe also fills his turn meter when it comes to the A1. Let's see if there's anything else there. I think that's the only turn meter fill that he has. I know he has a partnership with Kaja, which I think has to do with the fear, true fury aspect of his abilities. So yeah, it'd be his A1. That'd be kind of similar to Lady Quillen in that regard. He may provide a little bit more options to turn to like buff duration, decreasing and whatnot, which will help out with manipulating buffs, you know. That would actually be a great option for that previous stage that we were talking about. But let's see. Let's go up to Salient. Actually, you know what? I missed a couple other epics here. Let's see. We have... I normally don't refer to him because we think he's kind of lackluster, to be honest with you. Is Mass Fearmonger. Let's see. Each hit decreases the target's turn meter by 7.5% if the target's under true fear or fear. So 2-time hits would means that 2 chances to do that. Let's see if there's any other ones. Fear. This is the ability that places the fear. And then, of course, this is the one that just does a little bit of damage. So it's really mostly just his A1. And it's passive. Fills his champion's turn meter by 50% whenever an enemy's HP drops below 20%. So when they're about to die, he kicks up a notch in terms of turn meter. So there's 2 ways you can get that there. That can be kind of valuable. There is a cooldown on it, which is something you have to be aware of. Whereas the A1 is a little bit more spammable, but it's conditional to fear. And that, depending on what you put, maybe with Timid, he also has a chance to provide the fear, and then he can follow up with that and start smacking people a lot. There is that as an option. Cillian the Lucky, or let's go back to epics here. Discard. The one that we talk about being a provoker here, let's see what he has. I think it's his passive. Fills his turn meter target whenever they are attacked by an enemy under provoke. You can kind of get you could kind of force that engagement where provokes all 5 or how many enemies are in play. They attack him, and that each time they attack him, that's turn meter gain. And that'll slowly turn over to maybe a couple dozen points here and there in terms of being able to acquire that. A little bit. I don't like that condition of basically you have to take damage. That kind of sucks a little bit, but it is an option. There's Archmage Helmut. We talked about him being a stun champion, but he also has a turn meter fill on his A1 if the attack is critical. So you kind of want to build him with crit because both of these are crit dependent. The attack has to crit in order for the second part of that to kick in, and that's kind of what that conditional aspect is kind of there for. So there's that where he could bring that to the table on top of being a control champion. So you maybe can add him as like primarily the support, but also a little bit of extra turn meter fill to kind of get you through the finish line there. We talked about Kaja, Silly and the Lucky here. There is the A3. And now when we say we're manipulating turn meter, it doesn't have to be positive. It could also be stealing. So that right there could be one with the A3. The A1 also has a chance of stealing 30% of the targets. It's very low, though, so I keep that in mind. It's like roughly, what, 50%? 45, 50, yeah, 50% there. And then, of course, the A3, which is the turn meter, 50% there. And then I think that's pretty much all he has to offer. So the A1, A3, there's two options, but they're single targets, so keep that in mind. And then we have some of the more well-known champions in the meta, if you dare say. A3, I believe, is their big one, where it removes all debuffs from all allies and fills the turn meter of all allies by 50%. So no matter what, you get a 5 times turn meter manipulation effect there, which is great. I'm probably definitely going to use her. She's going to be most likely one of my main staples for this team. I do believe that if you have a Taurus in addition to it, Taurus's A1 also procs that, so her A1 technically is like a Taurus A1 if you have them both on the same team, which will also be turn meter manipulation, and that's something to kind of keep in mind. And I don't have one myself personally, so we're going to have to go over here to the to this option here as a reference point. But basically, each crit hit fills the turn meter of all allies by 5%. So that's another great one if you have both of those together. That's a lot of turn meter manipulation you can get just off of the dynamic duo. The Ukrainian duo, I believe, is what they're known for. That's a great option to consider. Let's go to our Bannerlords here a little bit more. Let's see. I didn't mention it, and I am going to mention our Androck here, even though he's not built. Poor me. I stripped him a little bit here and there. But we are going to do some turn meter fill still. I believe his passive is pretty much the big kicker here. Whenever anybody crits, it doesn't have to be literally anybody from your team crits. It increases the allies, like all allies' turn meter. So the way I'm probably going to end up being able to accomplish this, I'm just going to go in and try to brute force as much as possible, keep Androck in his base form, constantly buff cycle, keep the team going, super speed, super zoomies, and by the time I even get done with the first wave, I'm already done because hit, for every hit, just so you're aware, critical hits himself. So if you're using like a multi-hitter that does 3 hits, that's 3 by 5. That's already a lot, right? That's like 15. If you do it again, that's another 15. That's 30. I'm almost done. You know what I mean? Like we only have to manipulate it 40 times. So that's not to mention that like his own hits matter. Let's see if there's anything else that gives us turn meter besides that. It looks like that's pretty much it there for the most part. So he's going to be a very great contribution. I think Androck's going to be the big one I'm going to lay to claim along with my ratio. I'm going to use all my big stuff going into this one. We're going to take it very seriously. So, but these are some great options, both epics and legendaries to kind of give you some unorthodox picks. You know, you have the Kaja, the clown duos. You know, they could be really, really useful too for that same measure if you want to maybe put some effort in between too. So it's pretty cool, pretty cool for options. I think maybe a combination of these champions will allow me to really kind of sink this W home for me. So that's pretty much it for Stage 5. If I miss any options that haven't showed up, please let me know in the comments. I'm actually curious to see if there's anybody else we're missing. I think we are. I think there might be 1 or 2 other ones that are still pretty prevalent. Like, for example, maybe Raglan. So there you go. The A1 fills a turn meter of 3 random allies. That's one that we don't have. I want to say a Revive, and it gives you full turn meter. In that same regard, I wonder if that Revive also contributes towards like turn meter manipulation, because Revive brings it back into play, but giving them turn meter, whether that's full turn meter or 75% or 40%, I think that also contributes to it as well. So that might make someone like Kaja, who has a Revive that gives 50% turn meter, I think that also counts. We'll have to see. Anyways, with that being said, we're going to move on to the next stage here, which is going to be Stage 7. I believe by our standards today, that's going to be one of the first boss fights you're going to fight against. Let's take a look here. Stage 7 is, and that one is going to be clearing the stage within 100 turns. I think this is one of the ones where you just want to make sure you're building your team enough to sustain and survive, maybe even control a little bit, and just, you do your damage and pressure through, get rid of the 2 ways, get to the boss, and take on the boss. Now, we don't know exactly what stage is going to have what particular form of boss that we're going to deal with. There's going to be new types of boss mechanics we're going to have to deal with in addition to what we've had before. So obviously you're going to want to make sure you tailor your fight to address that. And I believe, if memory serves me correctly, this is one way that for those that are preparing, once you get to that point of your stage, you can go click on Stage 7, right? And you see the boss, and there's a little button called Boss Guide. And they kind of show you the kit that the boss has. Now, I don't believe they show you too much of what, like, if they have any, like, minions or whatever. You may not be able to see that part of the kit for those minions, but you get at least an idea. Maybe this guy still does put fear debuffs. Maybe he does something extra on top of that, like stealing buffs and then puts debuffs, you know, on top of that, you know, and spreading them or doing something around those lines. Basically, something that adds more on top of the difficulty. Expect more, you know? So the great consensus would be to just take a look, see what it is, find ways to either prevent that from being a powerhouse for the enemy or to play with it in mind. You know, if you know you're going to do it, maybe bring a cleanser in if they're going to do a lot of CC on you. If they're going to do a lot of punishing you in terms of using buffs, and obviously maybe you don't bring as much buff-centric champions and you go more utility-oriented where they're able to still get value in terms of supporting without hurting them too much, you know? Stuff like that is what you're looking to bring into the table for this fight. But you want to get it done pretty quickly, so you want to bring the best of the best in this one and clear house, you know? So 100 stage, stage 7, clearing up as fast as possible. You want to get it done within 100 turns. That's the goal. Now, with that being said, I wouldn't be surprised if they brought out like a bunch of champions that are like super tanky and super hard to beat. So, some key things to kind of help out. Obviously, you want to build your champions out as strong as possible, but this may be where we finally start seeing some value in the Faction Wars. Now, I have held back on putting this on because of some key reasons. I did some research ahead of time in prep for this video, as well as like across all the different difficulties. This applies to every faction. So, there are some factions where you don't want to just overly brute force it if you have to do some kind of other core mechanic. And by brute forcing it, next thing you know, you ran out of enemies to kill, and next thing you know, the round's over, and you didn't finish off that restriction. So I wanted to hold off and ease into this before I decided to make a move on, like, finishing it off. Because I can fully 10 out of 10 everything. But I wanted to hold off to get an idea of what we're going against, and then we adapt as we go along there. I have it ready. It's not changing. I believe we have confirmation by plan that this is going to apply to both hard and normal, as well as I don't think there's any changes planned for it being going from like a grade 1 to a grade 4, grade 3, grade 2. It should stay the same. It's going to apply to all, and that's something you can use to help benefit you. So ignore defense. Crit damage is going to help your damage dealers pack that punch, maybe get through the waves a little bit faster, along with your primary stats if you're using a specific type of champion. So this could be where value comes into play. Very, very, very importantly here. Play it by ear. See how it feels. Okay, can I get away with not doing it? Is the quality of life worth it? Or am I potentially hurting myself by overly investing into this, and next thing you know, I'm killing waves too fast? All right, that would be a concern, you know, especially if you have decent gear. So I'm being patient. We're gonna work our way with it. It shouldn't change, so we should be able to add it as we see fit. And that's when I'll start investing into it a little bit more, and then boom, we go ham. So with that being said, there's not really much else to say about that stage. It's just clear it fast. No summary words. Stage 8, though. This is where we start getting into what was normally be like the epic version of our materials that you would start getting for like the new craftable stuff that you get in the forge. Well, for here, I'm going to assume maybe this is where we start seeing an increase in tier for glyphs, or maybe even some pieces that may be useful for crafting materials. I don't know. We'll have to see. We'll have to see. There might be some relics that are on the play now. That might be the new craftable thing that we can get. But nevertheless, Stage 8, reduce 9+ enemies by 50% HP with 1 skill. So this is basically the same thing as the first stage, just now it's, instead of it being 6 champions, it's 9 champions. You'd probably do something very comparable, very similar, where you're setting up, doing your big damage, brought them down a lot, okay, rinse, repeat, you clear the stage. It's pretty much how you do it. Now, you can technically do it on the same champion 2 times in a row if they have 50% by the time you clear them out, and then or they're maybe just slightly over 50%. Maybe they healed themselves back up after you did your first big punch. You do another big punch. As long as you're bringing 50% of their HP down, it still counts. So you can still get that value if you're looking for it. But yeah, that one's pretty much self-explanatory. Same thing with Stage 9. What we said with Stage 2 applies the same. Instead of it being 10 provokes, now it's 15 provokes. So use the same staple of champions you use for that stage to get you over the finish line. And then you're pretty much good to go. And then, of course, at Stage 10, this is where it changes a little bit. This is where I would say your champion pool is really going to be a defining factor. You want good variety options to kind of help control. Obviously, you may have the best of the best in terms of options, but what happens when you have to pull in 3 epics? What I would recommend is you pick your top carries, your top carry potential champions that can really hold the team down and keep the team going. And then you bring in champions that you think could be an alternative option to it. So maybe your damage dealer was like Ronda or Staltis. Maybe it's time to bring that damage dealer to someone that you have a high blessing for. And that's where I would look at your champion pool, base it off what you can get to value-wise. Maybe approach one of the champions you have a better build for, and then like, all right, maybe I have better attack gear that I can give one of my nukers. Maybe I start building towards that Horden that I have a good blessing for, or whatever champion you have there. That's when I would start doing that. I think Stagnite would be a great option for setup, so he could be an easy plug and play, and then you find one other alternative option, and then you have something, you know? And that's it. You could technically also drop on one like big support, that would carry. Like maybe I would run Mariska and Androck as my two big non-epic champions, and all the rest of them are epics. But what if you need like a reviver? Then you can maybe lean towards Arsala as your support champion to keep the team going, and then lean towards damage dealers and other options in the legendary mythical side. You can flip it, but the whole goal of this is you need 3 epics on your team when you go for this clear. So the best thing I could do is try to control, try to maintain, and slowly beat it down and get it through. That's the best way I could suggest it. Clear the stage and be done with it. Now, with that being said, though, this is where those area bonuses are maybe really, really important because you need to get through the fire, Stage 11, though. We're going to move on to the next one. Defeat all enemies when they have no buffs on them. This is going to be an interesting one because it depends on what champions you get that you're going against. Some people start off the round with options. Like, what if you go against a Necrit who starts off by giving someone 3 buffs right off the rip? How do you deal with that? Well, you can start off with 2 ways. If it's a champion that places buffs on them after the round starts, not at the beginning of the round, but they use an active ability to do it. You could control them so they can't do it. Maybe if they have like an A1 that gives them a buff, you could also introduce champions like I'll go ahead and throw it in there. Timid, who has the ability to decrease the duration of all enemy buffs by 3 turns. That could be a great option. Or someone that could like strip it. I don't know if there's anyone that removes debuffs. Let's see what we got for option. We're actually going to tune into our filter for this one, but I thought Timid right off the rip would be a great option there. Or just beat them before they get a chance to buff, That could be a great option too as well, right? Let's see. Decrease buff duration. Let's start there. Let's add to the filter the Bannerlord since that's the restricted bases. I really only have Timid. Let's see. Decrease it. Remove buffs could be another option here. This is where maybe someone like Chancellor Yasmin could be an option. I believe it's her A3. It's a low chance. It's only 75 when fully booked, but it has a chance of removing all buffs from the enemies and then placing a sleep debuff on all enemies who have active buffs left still. So a little bit of like manipulation there. It's on a 4-turn cooldown, so it's less viable as like a great option, but still something to consider. Maybe you play as a utility support champion to kind of keep your team alive too. Then there's also Quintus. I believe it's his A2. Removes all buffs of a singular target. Maybe that's someone you need to just knock out the park, get him out of there. I may bring him in as my damage dealer, who's also going to have the chance to strip if I need a unique case scenario. And then there's one other one that I'm going to bring into play here that I think would be very valuable for us to consider. What if you have those champions that their A1 when they counterattack applies a buff, or they start the round off with it, or something along those lines where it's hard to keep buffs off of them? I would use a debuff called Block Buff. And believe it or not, we have some options. There is A2 for Warcaster. Its attack on enemies has a 50, boogle up to a 65-75% chance on a 3-turn cooldown. Not too bad, not the very best. I think you'd probably play him for that utility and then just try to play him to be a support champion with the block damage, keep your team going. But this is where Androx starts to shine yet again. He's all about buff increasing and buff duration on his base form, but on the second form, he strips, buff removal, and then also places a block buff on enemies without buffs for 2 turns. So if you're able to remove everything and get all the buffs off of them, and then on top of that place block buffs, even if they were to go into A1, unless they get cleansed, they're not placing that buff on them. That opens up for you to go ham, go home, and keep it going. So I may play Androck quite a bit in this faction war. I think he's going to be pretty valuable in that regard. But those are some options to consider when it comes to like ways you can approach this particular stage. Either buff strip, buff duration decrease, or block buffs to prevent them from being able to capitalize off of having buffs in this team. And all you have to do is just get and remove. You have to defeat all allies when they have no buffs on it. So every single target has to not have it. It's going to be kind of tough. I think Androck's going to be my shining star for that one. So we'll see. Now, stage 12. This is where it kind of goes back to what we had for stage 3, which is stunning. Instead of it being 10 targets, it's now 15 targets. We're going to rinse and repeat and use the exact same champions we had before. Refer to your Sicilian or your Helmut, which is probably what I'm going to rely on there. And, lock them out. Or stun sets. Whatever you got, right? Then we go to our next stage. Our next stage is going to be stage 13. Do not receive more than 10 debuffs. This one's going to be a bit of a challenge. And I feel like depending on what you go against, this could be very, very challenging because they may introduce buff strippers who then line up the damage dealers that do buffs or debuffs, and the next thing you know, you get penalized for it. So you can't take more than 10 debuffs. One way you could do it is either get them out of the fight early so you clear the wave really, really quickly so you don't have to deal with it, or you prevent yourself from taking debuffs. That's where I feel like Kaj is going to be really valuable. Her turn meter fill also comes with block debuff, which is very good. And it is a cleanse too as well, so you maybe something happened that caused you to get it. You can now, cleanse it and block debuff, and then you can put your team back into play. Then there's also, of course, Manaya. I believe it's our A3 that places a block debuff on all allies and basically also heals as well as stuff like that. You know, placing shields and whatnot. She could be a great contribution if you have her and not Kaja. I think I'm going to lean towards Kaja a little bit here. But I think my main goal is going to be to control the waves and control the enemies so that they can't do anything in addition to that. So she'll be one of my supporting casts, but then on the other side of it, I'm going to try to be a little bit more aggressive to stop them from being able to do anything in the first place. That's what I think my objective is going to be for that one. Now, that's pretty much going to clear us out for stage 13. Stage 14, I believe, is the next 7. You know, it goes by 7s. I believe that's going to be our next boss. And that one's just like the previous boss. But now we have 150 turns instead of 100 turns. So they're giving us even more turns, which means that we should expect a higher difficulty on top of that. Maybe even a totally different boss to fight, which is probably, it's probable. I would expect that. I say expect every single rotation to have maybe 1 or 2, maybe even 3 variations for boss to deal with. And they're going to be a headache. So brace yourselves. Battle of Attrition is going to be a big play, but you also want to make sure you get through it within a timely fashion. 150, right? So, stage 15, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next one. This one is beat the stage with all champions alive at all times. Now, pause. I mean, that means that you're going to have to worry about damage intake. You're going to have to worry about survivability. That's going to be the name of the game. So, what should we look for? We should look for champions that can buff, that can protect, that can sustain. Those are the 3 things we're looking for. So, champions that can shield your team, provide strengthen, people that can provide healing, like continuous heals, and just straight up healing themselves. You know, you have Kaja who A1s and heals herself, cleansing so that they don't take like debuff damage, like poisons, for example, if that's something that happens, or just straight up all of it, all the above to some degree. I think Marisha's going to be really broken for this one. But you're going to look for sustain being the name of the game. Battle of Attrition is going to be the thing. You don't want anybody to die. If someone dies, that's game, right? So, we're going to play with that in mind. We're going to try to play with control as well as just sustain being a big frontal core of this. So you might see some CC champions in play. You might see Mariska being a big one there to kind of keep the team going, keep them from getting control, you know, keep the health above the norm. Maybe even you consider, instead of picking some squishy nukers like Ronda, for example, who's an attack type champion, not crazy high defensive stats, maybe you start bringing in that Stultus who scales off of a defensive stat, literally defense, right? And that could be valuable. Or Terrace, who has HP. That may be where you want to lean towards those champions that are just tanky and they can win and battle through a system of attrition. You know, that's what you're looking for. So, with that being said, though, that's pretty much self-explanatory. Don't die. That's it. Beat the stage, don't die. Nobody could die. Period. Ever. During that fight. Period. Defeat 3 enemies. This is stage 16. Defeat 3 enemies using ally attack skills or counterattack. Now, when I was talking to some of my members, and this is a shout out to Chars, if you can hear me, if you watch this video, salute to you, brother. They asked for options for that, and I was like, well, I don't know exactly what we have. I'm interested to see what we have, and he's like, I want you to do this real quick. Go to positive effects and look under ally attack for options, and I did, and I had only one option. I was like, so this one's going to be kind of interesting. We have to defeat an enemy using an ally attack skill or counterattack. If I'm leaning towards ally attack right now as an option, I only have Mariska, and that's literally her A1. That is going to be kind of hard to do because you need to time it, you need to set up, and the only other thing that's kind of awful about Mariska is that her A1 is randomized, unless Terrace is in place. So this one kind of screams towards Taras being a really, Taras and Mariska being, this is the stage for them, I would say. And then more so Mariska specifically. Now, counterattacks could also be a very valuable thing there, and I didn't think about that either. So let's take a look and see what we got for options. We could do buffs, then we'll do the counterattack option. Really, it's just Seneschal. That's kind of crappy to say. You do have passives and whatnot that you could use. Let's see if I can find one here real quickly. I think it is like Retribution and Deterrence, which are counterattack centric ones. There might be 1 or 2 other ones that are like counterattack whenever you know something happens. I think it's these 2. It's like basically whenever this champion loses a single about a certain amount of HP, and then this one is whenever someone applies CC to your team on an ally, you can capitalize off that and counterattack, and that's conditional, and I think those are kind of hard to do. There's no sets that I think that introduce like counterattacking as a primary focus. So what are you at the mercy of? Counterattacking, which we had Seneschal. Seneschal, I wouldn't look at it as like a big damage dealing option. And then there's Mariska. That one's kind of a gamble. I think what you could do is with Mariska, you guys are battling the teams. You're trying to keep your team alive. You're doing your thing, right? And then just before an enemy's about to die, you stop targeting that and you start working on the rest of the enemies. And then when Mariska comes, A1. And then that ally attacker goes in and clears it, hopefully, and you don't have to worry about it anymore. You have to do that for at least 3 enemies. So it's going to be kind of challenging to do, but I think we could expect that to be a Something where Mariska is going to be my key partner for that one. I don't know if there's anybody else that could provide some kind of option for counterattacking or attacking, but that seems to be it for right now. All right. With that being said, this one is very, very scary in my opinion, which is Stage 17. You're going to see this one quite a bit across a lot of the different factions, but this one is don't land any weak hits. Well, how do we avoid landing weak hits? I think that's going to be kind of a hard one to surmise. And I'm just going to start off. This guy's like a pack meal for me, so please ignore his gear sets. But that was going to be kind of hard to facilitate. And the only one that I could say, just off of a gear standpoint, to help improve that option would be Affinity Breaker. Taking a bad hit, a weak hit, and turning it into a critical hit, 50% chance. It's a little bit of a gamble, but that would be the option. Now, mind you, we don't know what we're going against in that stage in particular. So depending on what the matchup is, if it's all blues, and obviously you just bring in all red champions and you have something, right? And then the going notion in terms of what could be a great alternative option would be just bring in all your voids. For me, that's kind of a little bit on the lower side. I don't really have much for options there, and that kind of scares me a little bit. But depending on what your champion pool's looking like, if you got a Baron, if you got a Taras, you got a Raglan, and you got Quintus and Mariska, you can bring that core 5 in, and there you go. There's your Void team that's never going to weak hit because there's not going to be an Infinity issue, right? And if they're going to take like an Enfeeblement, maybe there's a Marius on the wave, or Bambus who's able to get an Enfeeblement out or something like that, then you got like Mariska to cleanse, and you still can do it, you know? You got to be careful with it. Maybe that might be a target that you want to get out of the picture pretty early, right? But that's a hard one to do, and I wonder how they're going to implement ways for us to be able to do it. It really depends on what they bring to the table, but my two answers to this would be to either include Affinity Breaker as an option for builds, or try to go a more void friendly, avoid affinity-based team to kind of avoid taking too much damage. You know, that'd be the hard part. Now, with that being said, if that's still not possible and you have to use someone of a magic, force, or spirit affinity, what you could do is use a Quintus. You know, you target the champions that are really, really good for you to hit with the ones that are like positive affinity, you know, that there's affinity in play, and then you do the void ones to take care of the ones that are problematic, you know? Like, say, for instance, maybe I'm running, you know, a lot of blue on my team since I have a couple, like, Cillians, Rondas, for example, and there's a red champion, but I bring in Mariska and Quintus in addition to that. I could use Quintus, like, I'm going to get rid of that one problem that would help me hit weak with the rest of the team, and then I'll use the rest of them to deal with the ones that are positive. And you can maybe work that around and find a solution to help you out. Got to be careful, though, because they could turn into any one weak hit, I think, pretty much kills that option. So it's going to be tough, but I think maybe those two answers could give you a little bit of a W. Now, Stage 18, this is going to be another interesting one. You got to defeat 4+ enemies before they take a turn. So this one's all about brute forcing and going ham and going home. I would say this may be where that setup approach, where you're just buffing up your team, giving them ample amount of damage output, and then you're debuffing the enemy to give your damage output more value. Hit it and quit it. Keep it going, you know? And you want that to be a pack a punch, go ham, go home, you know? So word to the wise is you got to make sure your nukers can thump, you know? And that's going to be a very, very challenging one, especially if you're going against targets that are very hard to beat. So we'll see. That one depends, but I think that one's where you're going to have to be ready to really, really pack some punches. Stage 18, it's getting in the harder side, so I think that like 17 onwards, we expect these to be a bit more challenging. Stage 19, get an extra turn 5 times. This one is a little bit on the weirder side. I think I wasn't expecting it. We'll talk about kit, and then we'll talk about some options. But before we talk about kit, I want to go ahead and show you guys a set that would be a great opportunity for you to benefit off of, and that is Relentless. 18% chance to get an extra turn. You just throw that at the, like maybe a Mariska build as an example. Build up Mariska with some tankiness or survivability in a Relentless set and let her go. And if she gets an extra turn, she goes again. And if she gets an extra turn, she goes again. She likes to do it a lot, actually, believe it or not. Then there's also the premise behind maybe the kit granting an extra turn. Let's see if there's any effects that do it. It would be a positive effect, right? Grant extra turn. Let's go ahead and filter by the faction to make sure that we're looking only at the Bannerlords. And look what we got. We have Timid, who does his A2, which grants a extra turn if there's no enemies with an active buff. There's Mariska, I believe it's her A3. If she cleanses off at least 5 or more debuffs, grant an extra turn. That's a couple of ways you can manipulate it. There is Horden. I believe his is the A3, so he buffs himself with the Ascendant. So if he's at least 3-star or higher Ascension, you can automatically get the granted extra turn. That's one way maybe you could kind of cycle into that and get that done. You only need to get 5 extra turns. I think that the reliance of someone like Horden in that ability may not be necessary. I think that like maybe with Timid being able to cycle a couple times, especially if this is booked, this is a 6-turn, 4-turn cooldown. Maybe you could cycle into that a couple times within a fight. or just run the Relentless on them both, you know, and let that do the job, you know, because if the Relentless procs, that's one. If the extra turns proc, that's another two, you know, and then you're already on your way, you know. Last but not least, there's one that I have to mention, which I think is the Crossbowman. I think it's his A2 here. Increase crit rate on all allies in the grants the extra turn. I would say he's probably even more worse to consider, considering that he's a rare versus like someone like Horden, who's an epic. I'd rather lean on Horden, and then I would obviously rather lean on my legendaries and forego using the epics on that one. So those are some of the options there. I wonder if there's anybody else that grants extra turns here that gives you a little bit more oomph for your value. And I think that pretty much kind of alludes to pretty much that's it for the most part. But I think that's a good nod that you're looking for like some options to kind of just generate more turns. Let's see here. That was stage 19. This is stage 20 now. This one's also going to be a bit of a challenge, and this one's all about the battle of attrition too as well. Keep all your champions' HP above 75%. I think this one's going to be kind of a challenge. And I would argue that maybe control, you know, you don't have to worry about going below 75% HP if you're not taking any hits. That could be pretty good. But this is where maybe shielding, so temporary HP, I think would classify as not going into your actual HP, which is what I think they're looking for. Someone like Mariska who could provide a shield, or maybe even that Sigmund, or I believe Hellier puts a shield on everybody based on the damage he inflicts. Let me see if Chamfer does. I don't think he does. I think he's all just about debuffing and stuff. So, but yeah, to name a couple champions that are all about maybe putting buffs on, I believe Aislinn also puts a shield on. His actually scales pretty high, which is equal to 30% of his champion's HP on all allies for 2 turns. This is really, really strong. Block damage could be another great way where you can avoid taking too much hits. So champions like maybe that Warcaster could be very valuable where you're doing that block damage. It doesn't matter because you're not taking any hits, right? So that could be very valuable. Obviously, we have to watch out for what we're going against because like there may be some enemies that go through block damage. So you may have to watch out for that. But nevertheless, that could be something important to keep in mind. And then controlling them and then beating them down. That'd be my thought ideology behind that, you know? And then, of course, the very last stage, which is the boss stage, the finale, 21. This one, just like all the other bosses, cleared it within a certain amount of turns. And for this one, it's 200. So we expect that one to be a little bit more on the challenging side, but if you can beat through it pretty quickly, within a reasonable amount of time, keeping your allies alive, you'll have it. And that'll pretty much be it for the Bannerlords. I think this is like a great little jump. I'm kind of going off of my own champion pool, but maybe while you're watching this video, you could go along and see what you have for options, and definitely try to give yourself a little bit more room to like maybe try some variables out. I mean, obviously, there's more than one way to beat the fight, and I think that's kind of important to keep in mind. Like, for example, I didn't mention Oathbound, who has a chance of decreasing each target's turn meter. That could be great for manipulating turn meter for stage, what was it, stage 6, I believe it was. Great options, you know what I mean? Like you can look at a wide range of variations to improve based on what you have. And that's the whole point about this video, is to kind of experiment with ideas and to also give you guys insight as to what to expect for these restrictions. So with that being said, are you excited for Bannerlords? Is your champion pool ready? If not, what are you missing? Let me know in the comments below. I'm actually curious to hear what you guys have to say. And with that being said, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and always remember, stay ascended.
Got the